Spain's worst air disaster in 25 years. A crash that kills 154 people. It's 2:14 p.m. at Madrid Barajas Airport. There are 166 passengers on board. Today, Captain Antonio Luna is in command. A former Spanish Air Force pilot, he's been with Spanair for 9 years. First Officer Francisco Mulet joined the company just a year and a half ago. Almost all of his 1,300 flight hours are with Spanair. The flight began with a morning hop from Barcelona to Madrid. From Madrid, they'll fly 2 hours and 50 minutes south to Gran Canaria in the Canary Islands. The plane was at the threshold of the runway when the pilots noticed a temperature gauge was giving them faulty readings. Controllers cleared the MD-82 to return to the terminal. Spanair Flight 5022 was sent to a remote maintenance area in a far corner of the terminal. It took 9 minutes just to taxi there. By the time they reach the maintenance stand, the plane is already 42 minutes behind schedule. The sensor, called a ram air temperature probe, juts out from the nose of the plane. It measures the outside air temperature and feeds the information to the engines during flight. The sensor is sending faulty readings to the engines. Without it, the automation that adjusts engine power won't work properly. Maintenance workers explained that they couldn't repair the faulty sensor. Instead, they disabled it by cutting the electrical power to the sensor. The probe is not an essential piece of equipment. The crew simply has to keep track of the air temperature and adjust engine power manually. Spanair has been struggling financially. It has announced plans to cut 1/3 of its workforce. When your job is on the line, the last thing you want is to fall badly behind schedule. The captain is also well aware that his 166 overheated passengers are getting more and more unhappy. At the peak of the afternoon sun, the air temperature was 30 degrees Celsius, or 85 Fahrenheit. The tarmac radiates heat, raising the ramp temperature to over 100 degrees. Spanair Flight 5022 is finally getting back underway. On the after-start checklist, setting the flaps is the final item. Plane's wings are equipped with control surfaces, the flaps and slats, that extend at takeoff to help generate lift. The CVR reveals that just as the first officer is about to check the flaps and slats for the first time, the captain asks him to make a radio call. He never returns to finish that crucial item of the checklist. Setting the flaps is so important, crews are required to check them again during the taxi checklist. The crews skip the flaps and slats check for a second time. The crew has a third and final chance to set the flaps for takeoff. Investigators suspect that although the first officer announced the flap setting, the announcement was automatic.
Final items we have 8, 11 aligned, 11 stowed.
He wasn't focused on his instruments. He was merely reciting the list from memory. If he had looked at the gauge, he would have seen the flaps were set at 0, not 11. The captain likely isn't checking either. He's busy steering the plane towards the runway. There could be a link between the failure of Flight 5022's takeoff warning and the minor problem that sent the MD-82 back to the terminal. Investigators trace the complex electronics of the sensor and make a shocking discovery. The sensor and the takeoff warning both pass through the same electronic relay. Investigators suspect the R25 relay failed, disabling both the temperature sensor and the takeoff warning. By opting for the quick fix to the temperature sensor problem, the maintenance crew missed a critical opportunity to find the faulty relay. That failure sealed the fate of Flight 5022. Without the cockpit alarm, the pilots did not have their final line of defense to warn them of their mistake. At 2:23, the MD-82 aircraft starts speeding down the runway.
V1, rotates.
The plane couldn't climb because the pilots forgot to extend the all-important flaps before takeoff. An alarm warns the pilots something is going wrong.
Engine failure?
The first officer increases power, but he's losing control of the plane. The plane is less than 40 feet from the ground. Just seconds after takeoff, Flight 5022 slams into a riverbank beside the runway.